Commanders hire Dan Quinn to match with their new general manager, Adam Peters, to lead this franchise into the future.
The way that we live is not for everybody, okay? It's not, all right? Because we're going to run and put our bodies on people in a violent manner.
Whether the team is giving us the highest of highs or the blues of blues, we'll cover it all here on Commanders Nightly News. I, of course, am your host, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Let's get to tonight's lead story. So, the playoff scenarios for the Commanders are very simple, and this is the way you like it. This is what you do for 15, 16 weeks to prepare yourself at the end of the year, to put yourself in this exact position where you don't need help from anybody for anything, okay? We will need help if we want the 6th seed, but that's not the most important thing. The most important thing, 6th seed, 7th seed, 5th seed, doesn't really matter at the end of the day, right? Ultimately, you just want in the tournament. Now, styles make fights, obviously, and there are preferable matchups, right? There are matchups that we would prefer instead of, in lieu of another team having to play them on their turf, you'd rather play this team or that team. But at the end of the day, just get in, right? It's a one-game scenario. Anything can happen. Just get in. And that's all we're vying for at this point. And we put ourselves in a position through 15 games this season to all we have to do is win. Let's take a look at the playoff scenarios for the Commanders coming up here. And first, I'm going to show you what the actual NFC side looks like. So obviously, you've got 3 teams that have already clinched in the conference thus far. The 1-seeded Detroit Lions, right now, they're in the driver's seat to be, bless me, the number 1 seed. But they still have to play Minnesota in week 18, so we'll see what happens there. The Eagles are pretty much snug and firmly tucked in as the 2 seed after we took them out in week number 16. So they're going to probably be the 2 seed. They're not out of the running for the 1 seed, but they're going to need a lot of things to transpire for that to take place. They're going to need both Minnesota and Detroit to both lose out, which pretty much can't happen because they play each other. Somebody's going to win in that week, 18 game. So the likelihood is Detroit or Minnesota is going to be your number 1 seed. And so the Eagles are going to be your 2 seed. And then the Vikings have also clinched as the 5 seed. But right now, as of right now, they're the 5 seed. But again, they play Detroit in week 18. And so that will probably not only be for the division more likely than not, that'll also be for the number 1 seed and the first round bye and, home field advantage throughout in the NFC playoffs. So those 3 teams have clinched. So now you got the and there's a 4th team. Green Bay has also clinched. They won on Monday night, destroying the New Orleans Saints and shutting them out. And so they clinched the playoff berth as well. They're currently the 6th seed. That's the team that we're in pursuit of. But the likelihood of us catching them feels very slim at this point. Again, all they have to do is lose once and we win out. But they play Minnesota this week. That's the best chance for them to lose, right? Is them losing to Minnesota this week. But again, I'm not really pressed. I just want in, right? So here's where we stand with that. The Rams are currently the winner, or the leader rather, in the NFC West as the 3 seed. And they're in the driver's seat there. They just got to continue to win. They play Seattle, similar to Detroit and Minnesota playing one another in week 18. The Rams and the Seahawks play each other in week 18, and that could be for the division. It probably will be for the division if Seattle takes care of business on Thursday Night Football versus the Chicago Bears. That's a game that they got to win. They lose that game, and the Rams pretty much lock up the division with a win over Arizona in week 17. The Falcons, obviously we play them this week. They're the 4th seed right now because they are tied with Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay with a crushing loss on Sunday, losing to the Dallas Cowboys on the road on Sunday Night Football. That now puts them in a 2-way tie with Atlanta and the Falcons swept the Bucs this year. So virtue of that and having a bit better divisional record, the Falcons are now in first place in that division. So the Falcons have a lot to play for, obviously. And then so do we. And we're right below them, as you can see, as the 7th seed currently in the NFC playoffs. We have a simple equation here. As you can see, right now, we play the Falcons Sunday Night Football at home. Playoff probability, as you can see, if we right now currently we have a 95% chance of getting into playoffs. If we win, we clinch. As you can see, 99% with that little arrow pointing to the 99%, meaning you're in, right? It's 100%. If we lose, it drops down to 86%. You still got a really good shot of getting in. However, you would then need to beat Dallas the following week to ensure that you are a playoff team. There are other things that could take place, i.e. Atlanta losing in week 18, Tampa Bay losing in week 18, all of these things. But here's the actual scenario for the Commanders. It's really simple, as I mentioned. We put ourselves in a great spot, right? Now we just got to take care of business. Washington clinches a playoff berth with one of two things taking place on Sunday. One, Washington wins or ties against Atlanta. That's the most simplest route, right? We don't need anybody to do anything for us. Just win, right? But before the game even takes place on Sunday night, we may already know if we're in or not. Because if Tampa Bay loses or they tie on Sunday against the Carolina Panthers at home, then we're in, right? That's the other scenario. But the most simplest, basic form of us getting in is just to win. Like, you don't need to rely on anybody else to do anything for you. And as we've talked about before, the two South teams are the biggest threat to the Commanders getting into the postseason. That's why us winning or tying is at the top of the pile, because we play Atlanta, right? So we would essentially do the deed ourselves if we were to beat the Atlanta Falcons. A Tampa Bay loss or tie would also put us in, because, again, we're at 10. And I've been saying the magic number is 10, which we are already at. The reason I have said the magic number is 10 is the likelihood of getting in at 10 is great, but there's no guarantee, right? But you see how much stress we put on everybody by getting to 10 as quickly as we've done. Now, the magic number is really 11. You get to 11, and Tampa Bay can't get to 11. The Falcons can't get to 11. The Seahawks can't get to 11. The Rams could get to 11 still, but that doesn't matter, because if they get to 11, they're winning the division, right? So that doesn't impact us at all, because we're all about the wild card. The Rams are trying to win that division and get a home playoff game. So we're in great shape, but that doesn't ensure us anything. We got to win. That's the mindset heading into week number 17, is win and you're in. You can't get it any better than that. So take care of business, right? So let's get to in other news, where we heard from DQ and quarterback Jayden Daniels. Merry Christmas to everyone out there. These two had press conferences prior to Christmas Eve, and I talked about this on the show yesterday, that they swapped the days out. So Tuesday, normally an off day, you come in, you get your treatment, you watch film, you do all of that good stuff. But it's not an actual work day for the players, right? That's an off day. But a lot of guys come in, watch film, get treatment, things of that nature on Tuesdays. But they made Tuesday the work day, right? The start of the work week. And Wednesday was an off day because it was Christmas. So they wanted the players and the coaches and everyone in the building to spend that day with their families. So they swapped those 2 days. And so we got an injury report to get to. So we're going to take a look at that. Then we'll talk about what DQ and Jayden Daniels had to say. They both stepped up to the podium on Christmas Eve. So we'll talk about what was said there. And then we'll kind of get to the meat and potatoes of everything. We will keep our schedule as normal as possible here on this show, though. So while we will be unveiling the injury report for both teams today, we won't actually take our first look at the Atlanta Falcons until Wednesday, because we're going to keep everything else in line here. So let's go ahead, though, and take our first look at the injury report for the two teams ahead of this massive Week 17 matchup for both teams that are involved. We start with the good guys, obviously. And look, don't allow this list of injuries and guys being out to scare you, to spook you. It's Tuesday, right? They did not actually practice. It was just a walkthrough, right? So again, this is more of a predictor of what it would have looked like had there actually been real practice today. But it's Tuesday, right? A lot of guys aren't ready for action on Tuesday, okay? So if it looks like this on Thursday, then you should be alarmed. It won't. I promise you, it won't look this way on Thursday. So don't be too alarmed by this, but there are some alarming injuries here that I think you should be on high alert about. And we're going to discuss that now. So right at the top of the list is Dyami Brown. I'm concerned, right? He left the game with a hamstring. I don't think he returned to the game. I think we finished up the game with a combination of Luke McCaffrey and Olamide Zaccheaus and Jamison Crowder all kind of filling various roles for us. But Diami did not return in this game. Now, again, this is why you went out and you put a waiver claim in for KJ Osborne. But as I told you when Noah Brown went out, one of the pros of Noah Brown no longer being on that other side was that Diami could stretch the football field vertically. And we saw him do that. Deep in our own territory, Jayden was 4 yards deep in his own end zone when he let that thing rip, and Dyami Brown had a 51-yard catch. So that speed on the other side of Terry is threatening, and if Diami's not out there, you lose that because KJ Osborne isn't that kind of player. And none of the other guys are. OZ's not, Luke McCaffrey isn't, Jamison Crowder isn't. So you lose speed if Diami can't go. Hopefully he's okay, but my guess is that that hamstring is going to probably keep him out of this game, if I had to guess. So we may see KJ Osborne for the first time, but Thursday will be the real, telling story. If he can't go on Thursday, which I don't foresee him being able to go on Thursday, then he's probably not going to play on Sunday, is my guess. Ertz, this has been his thing. Same with Cleveland Farrell. You get rest on Wednesdays, so nothing to see here. If Ertz played last week dealing with everything that he was dealing with, the shoulder, the concussion, all of it, then there's no reason to believe that he won't be ready to practice on Thursday, post-Christmas. Same with Cleveland Farrell. This is his thing on Wednesday. He rests the knee, so expect both of them to be just fine. Marshawn Lattimore, similar to Dyami Brown, very concerned about the hamstring. Got to see what happens. Can we get a limited from him on Thursday? My guess, and I'm just going to be honest with you, it's going to, and again, I didn't sleep at a Holiday Inn last night. I'm not a doctor. I did not sleep at a Holiday Inn last night, but my guess is Marshawn won't be playing in this game. Neither will Dyami Brown. Neither will Jordan McGee, right? When you're dealing with hamstrings, it's a very delicate situation. It's a soft tissue injury. You don't want to push it. This isn't like swelling where if it goes down and you can manage the pain, you go out. No, a hamstring is totally different. It's soft tissue. There's no way around it. It just got to heal. So you never want to see the hamstring. You really don't. And so Dyami, Marshawn, Jordan McGee, I'm concerned about all of them. All of them left the game with hamstring injuries. None of them returned to the game with those hamstring injuries. So very concerned for all three of them. And McGee was just starting to play well, right? He was starting to get run with this with the first team defense. And he was getting, like, instead of them putting in when they would go to kind of more of a base alignment, when teams go to 21 personnel, right? when teams go to 21 personnel, when teams go to 13 personnel, or hell, even 12 personnel, they usually put in an extra linebacker. It's been Mykal Walker all year. Since the bye, it's been Jordan McGee, and that's been fun to see. But they came out in that Saints game, and Jordan and Michael Walker was getting cooked by Alvin Kamara, and they put Jordan McGee in, and he's been playing ever since. So that sucks that he's got the hamstring. Hopefully it's not serious, but again, hamstrings usually take a little while to heal from. Terry with an ankle, I don't think it's anything to see here. I feel confident he'll be ready to go, and he'll practice in full on Thursday. So I'm not really concerned. Owens ankle, we got to take a look, see at him. He was massive on special teams on Sunday. Like, he makes a difference. I chastised him in the Dallas game for not being physical enough on that field goal block when he should have lambasted the holder, which was a punter, and knocked him in the next Tuesday. But on special teams, he's a problem. On those kickoff coverage units, he's a problem. I hope he's okay. I hope he can go. Wiley, groin, something to keep an eye on. You just want him to be like, the last time he missed a game, he was still available for emergency use if necessary. I want him to be in that position again. Like, I don't mind him missing the game against Atlanta because we feel really good about Cornelius Lucas. I feel better about Lucas at tackle than Wiley, but that's nor here nor there. The bottom line is I don't want to have to put Trent Scott out on the field, if at all possible. But again, if Wiley's your emergency tackle, they would go to Scott first and only break the Andrew Wiley glass in case of an emergency. So I just want him to be available. I'd hate to have to ask a guy this late in the season like Chris Paul to have to step up and play if something went awry, right? So I hope Wiley's okay. If he's good enough to go, cool. If not, I feel good about Cornelius Lucas stepping in, but I just want Wiley to be healthy. I want all hands on deck if at all possible, right? Jonathan Allen with the pec full, Dante Fowler Jr. groin full. Great sign to see Fowler Jr. Continuing to be a full participant this late in the season. I think Jonathan Allen's playing this week. I told you, I think he's going to be a full participant on Thursday, and it'll be the first time that he'll have full contact at practice, and I think they're going to really push him this week and see if he can't go. I really, really, truly believe he'll go this week. But if he doesn't go this week, he'll go next week for sure, right? I would prefer him to go this week. And then if we clinch, he doesn't have to play in week 18. There's no reason for it, right? So get him out there, get his feet wet, get him some snaps this week. I mean, if he plays, they're probably going to play the hell out of him, I would guess. But nonetheless, I think he's a lot closer than we initially thought when he first, when the conversation first started. But last week, I think we got a real sense of, oh no, he's closer than we think. I think this is the week he comes back, but we'll see. So that's the Commanders' injury report. Let's go to the Ops and the Atlanta Falcons, and this is what their injury report looks like. Wide receiver Casey Washington, concussion, full participant. Again, their situation just like ours. They flip-flopped their 2 days of practice, so this Tuesday was, in effect, their Wednesday. So, again, same thing applies for them. This was a glorified walkthrough. It wasn't a real actual practice. This is just a projection of what it would have been had it been a Wednesday in a real practice. So, it looks good. Again, they don't have a lot of guys on this thing that should, if you're a Falcons fan, make you worried. And if you're a Commanders fan, get you excited about, hey, this guy may not play. There are only a couple of names up here that, get you going, and they look like they're going to be just fine. Drake London is a name. Matthew Judon is a name. His isn't even injury related. It's NIR, right? So he's perfectly fine, just getting vet rest. Drake London knee limited. That means he would have practiced. He should be a full participant, I would guess, on Thursday. Kevin King is a big one. The depth at corner, same with Antonio Hamilton. If those two can't go, it eats away at the depth of that secondary. It's a really good secondary, one of the better secondaries from a safety standpoint in the NFL. And the corners aren't bad, especially AJ Terrell. So Kevin King has made some plays for them this season, but at the end of the day, there's really nothing to see here. Ross Dwelly back up like a third string tight end. Lorenzo Carter, solid linebacker, but doesn't necessarily move the needle. Drake London, obviously, that's wide receiver one for them, but he's going to play. Kadero Hodge is a core special teamer. And, remember the night that Kirk Cousins threw for 500 yards, he had the game-winning touchdown on the catch and run. So he can also play receiver if need be. Junon, as we know, what he's capable of, he's fine. Zach Harrison, Achilles, defensive end, just depth on the offensive line. And then, as I mentioned, Kevin King and Antonio Hamilton both out of practice on Tuesday, but no, guarantees that those guys don't suit up on Sunday. So this is a non-threatening injury report for the Atlanta Falcons. We'll see if anything changes with it as the week progresses. So getting to what was said at the podium by both DQ and Jayden, we'll start with head coach Dan Quinn. He talked about a number of topics. He started out the press conference really talking about Cliff Kingsbury and, talking about learning about Cliff. He's like, I really didn't know him personally before adding him to this staff. I knew of him. DQ said I knew of him, and we had some battles in college. And remember, he talked about all these things when Cliff was first hired, about them going all the way back to their SEC days. Cliff was at Texas A&M with Johnny Manziel, and DQ was at Florida. And just really admiring what Cliff was able to do back then and kind of following his career from there. And so, Cliff was in the NFL, DQ was over in Dallas, so their paths crossed. Cliff was in Atlanta at the beginning of Cliff's tenure in Arizona in 19. Then he went over to Dallas in 20 and stayed there, for the duration of Cliff's career as a head coach. And so he got to see him up close in the NFL, and he just really respected him. But he said, getting to know him, he is a serious competitor, and he said you could see it in some of his play calls. He said Cliff loves the competition Wednesdays that they do, where it's good on good. So sometimes I think it's competition Thursday, where a lot of times you get the good on good. First offense versus first team defense. And he's like, he relishes those opportunities to try to get the best of the defense and things of that nature. So he's like, he's really excited about what Cliff has brought to the table thus far. We got a really good update on Austin Eckler. It's funny because I had asked the Commanders Kings on that stream on Monday about, do you guys think Austin Eckler is going to be back? And I think everyone on the panel said, no, I don't think he's going to be back. I think he's going to play at some point again this season. But I will say it did sound pretty ominous when you listen to Austin Eckler, talk on the radio and things of that nature. He sounded like a guy that was really weighing a lot of his options and, kind of just seeing how it was going to play out. But I think them putting him on IR was more of an opportunity for him to just kind of hit the reset button, kind of give his body and his brain a chance to just rest instead of trying to leave that window open and see if he could get back. It was more about just taking that whole thing off the table and saying, hey, you just rest up, you see how you feel, and then we'll go from there once once that month is up, we'll see where you are then, right? So he's like, Austin's been in every meeting. He's responding really well. They love the progress that he's shown, and he's trending in the right direction. And this is the last week, similar to Austin Seibert. Both of them were, injured in the Cowboys game. They're both Austins are eligible to come off of IR next week against the Cowboys, fittingly, the team that they got injured against the first time. So we'll see what happens with both Austins, but I think a lot of us are more interested in what happens with Austin Eckler, but you should be just as, interested in what happens with Austin Seibert, right? Because we need to have some sort of stability at the kicking position. And you really didn't get to see that on display against the Eagles because I love this. We didn't kick any field goals. Everything was a touchdown. We scored 5 touchdowns and a 2-point conversion. So all we needed from Zane Gonzalez was him to make the extra points, which he did. So big shout out to Zane Gonzalez for doing his job, but it wasn't a very difficult one. So, and you know what? I don't really want to test him. I really just prefer them to continue to score touchdowns. That's really nice. He also talked about John Allen and what his presence would mean to this team should he come back. And, they're not going to get into when he's coming back, but, he said it's along the lines of Marshawn Lattimore in terms of the boost that he would give the football team. He's like, he's not a new player like Lattimore was. So, the getting him acclimated thing is going to be as rigid a process, but he said it's very similar in that you're adding a player of that caliber this late in the season, and that's a massive boost for your team. I thought probably the most impactful thing that DQ talked about at this presser, though, was the offensive line and the run game in particular. So, that's been an issue here. It's easy to kind of sweep that under the rug because we've been winning. We're on a 3-game winning streak, and all's well that ends well. But this isn't a sustainable model, right? We have not run the football well since the bye, right? We went into the bye with our highest rushing output of the season against Tennessee, which is a really good front. One of the better ones we've seen this season, and we destroyed them. We went into the bye thinking, okay, yeah, we're back. And when you say back, you're thinking we're running the football, we're controlling time of possession, we're converting on third downs, we're doing all the things that we did early in the season to start off 7-2 to help us be one of the most prolific and proficient offenses in the NFL. And while a lot of those things are taking place, they're taking place in a different manner than they were earlier in the season. Earlier in the season, we were gutting teams on the ground, right? Between Jayden and the running backs, it was hard to stop us on the ground. That's how we were getting into third downs that were manageable. That's why we were converting at such a high clip. That's why we were possessing the football longer, winning time of possession, and that's why we were scoring so many points, right? Well, that hasn't happened post-bye. That's not what happened against New Orleans. We did not run it well. We converted on third downs because of Jayden, whether it was his legs or his arm. That's why we converted. We won time of possession in that game because the Saints stunk in the first half, not because the Saints, weren't not because we were able to run the ball and control the clock and convert that way. The Saints were awful in the first half, and we had the ball pretty much the whole entire first half. That's why we won time of possession against the Saints. We couldn't run the ball at all, and it was a rough go of it. Jayden had to save us, essentially. Fast forward to last week, same difference. We didn't even try to run the ball, it felt like. And then when we did try, it wasn't successful. And it led them to just put it on Five's back and his shoulder and say, hey, go get us the win, big dog. And he did. But he's our leading rusher this season. That's not good, okay? Some of that is Brian Robinson Jr. missing time this season, but he also could have overtaken Jayden if he just come back and run really well against the Saints and the Eagles. But he didn't. And so Jayden is our leading rusher this season. Jayden was our leading rusher on Sunday. The run game has been awful. They're not opening up holes in the run game. They're not creating any space in the run game. And it's putting us in some tough situations where the pass is having to bail us out, or Jayden himself with his legs is having to bail us out on the offensive side. And DQ said, yeah, they're doing a really good job of, picking up blitzes, which, remember, the Eagles blitzed more times in week number 16 than they had blitzed all season long, 2 times as many times as they had blitzed the season on average. And that was the most a team had blitzed Jayden Daniels in any given game this season, and he was barely touched, okay? They did a masterful job up front of passing off stunts and twists and winning one-on-one individual matchups. Carter didn't wreck the game from a pass rushing standpoint. We didn't really hear from Josh Sweat. none of their edge rushers. Nolan Smith, I think, had the lone sack, and that really wasn't like a clean, oh, he just beat the tackle sack. That was a Jayden didn't know he was coming from behind, as he tried to vacate the pocket. He had time to throw, but he was trying to get out of the pocket type of sack. So it wasn't, the oh man, immediately win like it was the first time we saw the Eagles. But in that same vein, DQ was like, for as good as we were pass blocking, we got to be better as a team run blocking. And he said, we told the offensive line, y'all got to get back to the basics, to the fundamentals of, hey, just be physical, man. Like DQ's like, sometimes you can see guys overthinking it, right? Like he's like, just don't overthink it. It's like, it's not scientific here. Like, let's just hit somebody. Let's just be physical. Let's make them. If we make it, he said, I don't care if you make a mistake. Just make it fast and physical. I don't really give a shit at this point. But he's like, you see guys overthinking it. Don't overthink it. He said, just fly off the ball and hit somebody. And even if it's the wrong guy, just do it physically and do it fast, and we'll figure it out later. But he's like, his message overall was, hey, we got to be more physical. Other teams, like I told you, I had never seen us punked this season like we did against New Orleans. That was the biggest ass kick fest I've seen from our offensive line in terms of the opposition kicking our ass. The Saints just were way more physical. I hadn't seen that all season. I don't know what offensive line that was, but it's not the offensive line I had watched this season. So I think that's kind of where DQ is coming from. Like, I didn't think that it was as bad, but we'll watch the film and we'll determine how bad it was in the run game. I would assume it was a combination of the offensive line getting beat up and maybe the running backs not having the best vision, but DQ made it abundantly clear that the physicality, it needs to ratchet up in the run game. And I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that. So that was his message, like, hey, get back to just being who we are. Get back to firing off the ball, putting somebody's dick in the dirt, and going on from there, right? So he talked about the receiver stepping up. And, he pointed out Diami on the deep ball. We could feel his speed. I talked about that. I said, that's the one advantage you gain by Noah Brown being out and Diami Brown being inserted is one Brown, Noah, more of a possession guy. And we would throw deep balls to him, but he never wins, right? He drew pass interference penalties, but he never wins. The other Brown, Diami, offers you speed on the other side of Terry. So now you can't just think that every deep ball attempt is going to Terry's way because he can throw it to Diami as well. He stretches the football field vertically. And you lose that if Diami is no longer in the lineup. So I really hope Diami is okay because he offers something there that you just don't get from the other receivers on this roster not named Terry McLaurin. And he said, yeah, Diami being able to get vertical was huge, right? Then he talked about OZ, and he's like, OZ's just, I told you, that's his boy. Him and OZ's relationship goes all the way back to Atlanta. DQ was the guy that gave OZ a shot. Like, OZ was undrafted out of UVA, made the team in Atlanta, and DQ. And I told you, I'm a big Olamide Zaccheaus fan, too. I thought he was going to be really good for the Eagles. When they got him, I was like, shit, they actually got a real number 3 receiver now. But we get him here, and you can see what OZ brings to the table. But he said, look, OZ plays with a level of toughness and grit, and he just plays hard. And he said the thing that's infectious about that is guys like Luke and Diami and others, they got to keep up with him. They don't want him to outshine them because of, a guy just willing to outwork them. So he's like, OZ rubs off on those other guys because they trying to keep up with his physicality. They trying to keep up with his determination, his grit, his want to. And we saw that on the fumble recovery against Cleveland, right? And Luke was right behind him. So he's like, yeah, we really appreciate that. And then obviously Jamison Crowder being the veteran that he is. He had 3 catches in the game. All 3 were on third downs. And of course the, big one, the last one wasn't on a third down. It was on a 2nd and goal from the 10 on the touchdown the game winner, that is. But the first touchdown was a third down, and he had another catch in the game that was a third down conversion as well. So Crowder has become a target, at this point of the season, a veteran that Jayden can trust and knows he's going to get open, knows he's going to win. And that's really valuable for a young quarterback, especially this time of the year. So he talked about all of those guys kind of contributing and, doing what they ultimately did on Sunday, and going to need more from that, more from those guys moving forward. And then he talked about Jayden's leadership. And, that had been a conversation early in the season. Like, we're not going to, rush this guy to be a leader. He's got to earn it. And we love that because we've seen here in past years where Dwayne Haskins was made a captain. And, when Ron Rivera got here, and I think Sam Howell was named a captain. Like, you always just assume, well, he's a quarterback, he's going to be a captain because he's the quarterback. But you want the young guys to earn it. You want a guy to get in the building, to showcase that ability, and let his natural leadership qualities stand out if there are any. And Jayden is a natural leader just by the way he carries himself, the work ethic he shows, the ability to show up early, leave late, and lead by example. And what's been really refreshing, and DQ talked about this, is the belief that he's instilled in his teammates. It extends to the fan base, right? Like, who didn't think we were going to win the game when he got that second opportunity with the football late in that game with a minute 52 left, a timeout, down 5? Who didn't think we were going to go win the game? I did. And most of the fans in the mob thought he was going to do it as well, right? And most of you said, I knew we were going to win once we got the football back. He's instilled that. If the Giants game wasn't enough, if Cincinnati game wasn't enough, if the Bears game wasn't enough, if the Cowboys game wasn't enough, if the Ravens game wasn't enough, here's another example of him in a late game situation finding a way to get it done. And DQ said the players just believe. He said Jayden has taken the players in the locker room and the coaching staff and everyone in that building from wanting to win to believing that they're going to win, to knowing that they're going to win. And that's next level shit. Having someone be able to change the way that you think about the outcome of a game, no matter where you are and no matter what the difference in the score is, we're still going to win because we got that guy. And we heard players saying that early in the season. We got 5, we got a shot. And it proved itself again on Sunday. And DQ's like, that's one of his biggest superpowers, is the ability to get people to believe. Hey, no, we winning this game. Like, we've seen teams that crumble under the type of pressure. That was a lot of weight to start the game off. Down 14-0, down 21-7. We've seen teams around here crumble. You need to look no further than the Bears game last year. We saw a team crumble under that weight of a slow start, can't get right. We saw teams crumble under that type of pressure before, many a times. We scored 7 whole points against the Giants last year. 14-0 at the beginning of that game, and we never recovered, right? So we've seen this team crumble under that type of pressure many a times. Not happening with 5. It's just not going to happen. And DQ said that's because there's a belief that exists because of Jayden Daniels and his abilities. That's powerful stuff. Really powerful stuff. So then you get to Jayden Daniels, and his press conference was really lighthearted. Talked a lot about various, and DQ, just to finish up, talked about Michael Penix Jr. and the threat that he poses. And he talked about, hey, we scouted him in the draft process, actually had to come in for a visit. He's a tough kid. He does a lot of his damage from the pocket, which is true. He's like, he's a really good football player, gets it out quickly, accurately, DQ's like, we love his story. Obviously, he's been through a lot of adversity with the two, ACLs and whatnot, but played a lot of football, seen a lot of stuff, smart kid, and they know they got their work cut out for him on Sunday. Then you get to Jayden, and Jayden, kind of continued the Michael Penix Jr. conversation, talked about going through the draft process with him. That's when he really got to know Michael Penix Jr. Said, hey, he's a cool dude, down to earth. He likes to rap. He be freestyling. He said he's a jokester. So he's like, he's a good dude, man. So he's happy to see him finally get his opportunity. And he thinks the world of him. Same with Bryce Young. He mentioned Bryce Young, that's his boy. And he talked about Bryce Young getting an opportunity. I had no idea that Bryce had gotten a nickname. They called him the Carolina Reaper, I think is what David Harrison said. They called him in Carolina. I guess he came back from the dead, right? And he's out here killing teams out here. And so Jayden laughed because he hadn't heard the nickname. That was the first time I heard the shit. So that was pretty funny. It's cool that he might. I always felt like Bryce Young could play in this league. And I was fighting Carolina Panthers fans who told me he couldn't play in this league. I'm like, that's impossible. I refuse to believe that a dude that I watched play in the SEC at the level that he played at with not the same caliber of talent we're used to seeing Alabama quarterbacks get. He didn't have the Mac Jones, talent, and Tua Tagovailoa kit of talent that those guys had when they were at Alabama. Bryce Young wasn't afforded that. And so I refuse to believe he can't play at the NFL level. The dude was one of the best high school quarterbacks, one of the best college quarterbacks. All of a sudden, he can't play? Nah, I ain't buying that. So he's like happy to see Bryce have the success he's having. He said, I always knew he could do it. And he's like, anytime, good or bad, like the finish of the game, as long as he's playing well, I always hit him up, right? So, because Bryce has a chance to do us a solid on Sunday by taking out the Buccaneers. They had a chance to do it earlier and let them slip a couple weeks back when they were at home, when the Bucs went to overtime and beat them. But they got a chance to get them this time. I don't see it happening, but it could happen, right? He talked about him and Bobby Wagner's relationship. He said he sees Bobby as a big brother. He said, I didn't know Bobby before this, never had met him. I knew of Bobby, obviously, watching him from afar. But he's like, didn't know him. Now, he's taught me how to, he said, Jayden said he taught him how to study, watch film, how to, treat his body, just how to prepare, how to be a pro. He said Bobby annoys him. But he was, of course, tongue-in-cheek. He was being facetious. He was joking about that. But he said they're going to play basketball in the offseason. They asked him about Christmas and things of that nature, and he was like, one of his fondest Christmas memories was waking up to watch basketball. I think that's all of us, because Christmas used to belong to the NBA. It doesn't have the same feel, and it's not just because of the NFL jumping in the mix now, but yeah, it does have something to do with that too. But I don't think they're doing a really good job of marketing their best stars, the young ones, especially on Christmas Day. They got to do a better job with some of these matchups. But I can tell you this: Jayden was asked, "What is he thankful for?" And it warmed my heart to hear him say being drafted by the Washington Commanders. And he says he's thankful for the fan base and his teammates and the brotherhood that he's cultivated over this year. And it just made me smile. It warmed my heart to hear him say that, because how many players do you know that were happy they were drafted by this franchise? I mean, think about how different his career could have turned out. And I think this isn't lost on him. He's not going to say this. There's no benefit to saying this, but imagine if he was drafted by Chicago and maybe he goes in there and the Bears are 10-5 right now with him at quarterback. I mean, we know how good their defense has been this season, and the weapons that they put in Chicago. Who's to say that they're not 10 or, right there with the rest of that division? Hell, right? The Bears were 4-2 at one point. You put Jayden Daniels behind that offensive line, he probably would make them look a lot better than Caleb has. Caleb's been one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the league this season, but you put Jayden behind that group, and it probably isn't the same case, right? And I would imagine if you put Caleb Williams behind this offensive line, he's still one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the NFL. So a lot could have changed, but that's just a dysfunctional organization, though, right? They don't have their shit together. The Bears don't, right? And so it could have turned out a lot differently for him had he been drafted by the wrong team. But, we drafted him. He wants to be here. He's excited. Remember, and this sounds foolish now, but going back to the draft process, I actually did a video saying, I'm not sure that Jayden Daniel wants to be here. And we knew that he wanted to go to Vegas. Obviously, he's a West Coast kid. He knew Antonio Pierce from Pierce being a coach at Arizona State when Jayden was there. So there was a history. He wanted to go to if he had a choice, he would want to go to the Vegas Raiders. But I think, he has a greater appreciation for the organization that drafted him and the position that he's been put in, DQ being his coach and all the players that are here and the staff. And I think he just realizes, man, this is the best place. And he's a spiritual guy. And I'm a big proponent of everything happens for a reason. And he realizes and, kind of reflecting, and God put him in this position to be successful, put him in the place where he was supposed to be. And I know I'm getting a little deep here, but it's a full circle moment for us as fans. Like, a lot of things have gone well this year, and none better than Jayden Daniels becoming the starter, being drafted here, becoming the starter, and playing the way that he's played, and giving us the hope that he's instilled us with. But, all it would have taken was a Panthers win last year to make them the number 2 pick and us the number 1 pick. All it would have taken was Greg Zuerlein not banging home a 54-yard field goal, with 2 seconds left, for us to not be in this position. But everything fell into place because I truly believe if we were the number 1 pick, we would have taken Caleb Williams. They could tell us whatever they want. They would have taken Caleb Williams. I really believe that. And so getting Jayden Daniels was the best thing that ever happened to us. And I think it's vice versa. It goes both ways. Him ending up here was the best thing to happen to him. And you think about all the players that left here and had negative shit to say, and rightfully so. This was a trash organization when Montez Sweat was here, when Antonio Gibson was here, and all of them had, Chase Young, all of them had, shit to say when they left. Rightfully so. We were a piece of shit organization, but we're a far cry from that now, and it just feels good, man. Feels good. And yeah, Jayden pretty much talked about that. So he talked about the Falcons secondary, their defense in general, and all the players. And I love how he can just rattle off 6, 7 names from every defense that he's about to go against. It just speaks to the retention, man. Every time they ask him about a team's defense coming up, he rattles off without hesitation 4 or 5 guys. He did about 6 or 7 from this Falcons defense. Both safeties, the corner, A.J. Terrell, rattled off 2 or 3 defensive linemen. He's a student of the game. I love it. And he talked about David Blau's impact. And again, I think we've surrounded him. Remember, DQ talked about the importance of having all of these quarterbacks around Jayden, right? The building is full of ex-quarterbacks: Tavita Pritchard, David Blau, Brian Johnson, so many former quarterbacks. And then you got obviously Marcus Mariota and all these different guys that have played the position. Cliff Kingsbury, a former quarterback. So it helps. And he's like, Blau was just in the league a couple years ago, man. Like, he's been around Kirk Cousins and Matthew Stafford and Jared Goff. And so he's got all these different things he can share. And, he brings a different level of energy because of the gap difference in age is not that great. So they're kind of like, you know, it's awesome, right? And which is why they have so much competition between the two of them, you know, playing pig and whatnot. So it's just a really good environment. Something else DQ said, going back to DQ, he talked about two things. He said, you know, somebody came up to him at the Christmas party and said, this doesn't feel like an office party. It feels like a gathering of friends. Feels like somebody had a party at their house and we're all friends at somebody's house. And he's like, he made him smile because that's the environment he's trying to cultivate. And he said he feels like that energy is being taken onto the field, and that's why they're playing so well together as one. And then he also talked about Bobby Wagner, you know, just being a dude, tackling, being square. He was talking to Jeremy Reeves about, you know, Bobby Wagner as they were putting it. He said Izzo and I think he said Izzo and Brian Johnson put together like a cut up of, you know, plays, tackles. They usually do that every week, but Izzo did something special since it was, you know, going into Christmas. He put together the kind of the season-long highlights of, you know, the best tackles, whatnot. And he said Bobby Wagner was up there a ton. And he just talked about how square he was and, you know, how fundamentally sound. And so, you know, all of that good stuff, man. I think Bobby Wagner has played well enough. I can't speak for y'all, but I would love to have Bobby Wagner back for it. And, you know, I would sign him to a 2-year deal. Obviously, get out after next year if it doesn't look good. But I would love to have Bobby Wagner on a 2-year, you know, $15 million deal. You know, whatever that number looks like, that's good for Bobby, good for us. I think he signed for 7.5 this year, so that's why I threw out 15. But I mean, if that number's 2 for 18, whatever, if the cap goes up and so the number goes up, fine. But I think Bobby's earned the right to be here again next year. But that's just me. Anyway, I digress. So that was what was said with the two press conferences. We'll dig into the film and we'll talk about that for Wednesday's show. And then we'll get back to the proceedings on Thursday. Business as usual. We'll turn our attention to Atlanta, do all of that good stuff and really kind of dig in. Take our first look at the Falcons on the Wednesday show. Put a bow on the Eagles game, having, you know, a chance to look at the film. We'll do all of that stuff. And then Thursday, when the players get back to practice, hopefully we'll hear from Joe Witt Jr., Cliff Kingsbury, and we'll be able to just seamlessly transition into Atlanta, go behind enemy lines, and really get this party started and get back to a level of normalcy as we head into this massive Sunday night football matchup against the Atlanta Falcons. But in any event, that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on Commanders Nightly News. You're going to be seeing videos come out at just random times because we're playing catch up here, obviously. But Merry Christmas. I don't know when you're going to see this video, but Merry Christmas to you and yours. If you're seeing this after Christmas, I hope your Christmas was excellent. Mine was fantastic. Just enjoying the family. The food was fan-effing-tastic. I've been on a purge here of late. So it felt good to eat some real food, man. And it was delicioso. But I hope Christmas was as good for you as it was for me and mine. So I'll see you guys soon. Until next time, I'm your man Louie T signing off. Take care. Have a good one.
Here comes the diesel. Here comes the diesel. There's the snap, hand to Riggins. Good hole. He's got the first down to the 40. He's got